Hello, my name is Philippe Van Lieu, and I'd like to welcome you to the very first 360 cast of MindVR's The 360 Guide to California. This is the show that actually brings some of the coolest places in California to you through the magic of 3D 360 filmmaking. If this is your first time watching a 360 cast and you would like to learn more about it, feel free to check out this video which explains 360 casts in a little more detail. There's also a link in the description. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this first episode, and I look forward to making more episodes as well. And so, without further ado, now I live in Daly City, California, which I call the cuticle of San Francisco, and right next door is a small town called Colma. They say it's got its name from some guy named Coleman, or some Mexican or European city that the residents came from, but I like the theory that because of all the fog that we get, it was named after some kid who one day yelled to his mom, "It's Colma!" If it's not real, who cares? I still like the story. Either way, it was known by this name for so long that between its founding in 1924 and 1941, it was actually named Lawndale. But because there was already a Lawndale in Southern California, and no one really liked that name, they switched it back to Colma. Good riddance. Well anyways, Colma is your typical modern city. It has your regular stores, car dealerships, Best Buys, and dead people? If you don't believe me, take a quick look behind you. And if you can't, I'll give you a hand. Yep, Colma serves as our necropolis, where its living population is outnumbered by the dead by over 1,000 to 1. Thus Colma's motto, "It's great to be alive in Colma." But first, let's talk about where many of these dead came from before they arrived in Colma. And I mean, apart from the fact that they're alive at one time. So in the late 1850s, after San Francisco became an American city, and while the gold rush was in full force, the first cemeteries in San Francisco were built, including Calvary Cemetery, currently at Target and Best Buy, Oddfellows, and the cemetery at Lone Mountain, which is now the USF campus, all of which by 1860. These cemeteries, at the time, were built well outside the main parts of San Francisco. But as all that new gold rush money started to pour into town, those main parts of San Francisco grew and eventually enveloped these cemeteries. Now no longer outside of the city, these cemeteries were now beginning to take up precious and valuable real estate. Therefore, starting in the 1880s and in full swing by the turn of the century, most of the residents of San Francisco voted to prevent further interring of the dead within the city limits, and then, by 1937, had decided to evict all the dead out of the city outright, pushing them further outside the city boundaries once again. One of the first to be removed was the Jewish cemetery at Mission Dolores. The Mission Park Association, organized in 1897, fought hard to have the land converted into a park, despite the fact that Golden Gate Park seemed to serve the public's need for an open green area. By 1905, the association's campaign to purchase the Jewish cemetery's land was successful, and in due time it became the world-class park we know of today. Unfortunately, popular support, combined with World Wars I and II, prevented the complete removal of most other cemeteries within the city limits. The writing was on the wall, however, and by 1939, the last of the exhumations of the dead at Lone Mountain, then called Laurel Hill, and Calvary cemeteries began and were completed by 1948. But this doesn't mean the dead no longer exist within city limits. Far from it. Every once in a while, new construction and development eventually uncovers a hidden cache of the dead. For example, as recently as 2016, the casket of a little girl, still clutching the rose she was buried with some 150 years ago, was discovered under her house in the Lone Mountain area in the Richmond district. So, where did all these cemeteries go? Despite the new location, there's definitely a clear line connecting the old with the new. For example, when the Jewish cemeteries at Mission Dolores Park moved to Colma, they became the Home of Peace and Hills of Eternity cemeteries, while Oddfellows became Greenlawn Cemetery. Colma itself was chosen simply by the fact that there was no one there, and the people that were there were willing to work with the cemeteries. In fact, the cemeteries were basically the main source of income and jobs for Colma up until the 1980s, right up until the modern businesses started to come into town. So how many dead people are buried in Colma? All of them! But actually the cemeteries in Colma are not just full of the dead, but full of some of the famous dead. Let's take a quick visit to some of them. Raised in the Bay Area, Joe DiMaggio played semi-pro baseball for the San Francisco Seals in 1932, decades before the Giants came to town. Later in 1954, Joe DiMaggio married Marilyn Monroe at San Francisco City Hall. After her death in 1962, DiMaggio was devastated and never remarried. His last words before his death in 1999 were about seeing her again. Born in 1846, Charles DeYoung, along with his brother M.H. DeYoung, founded the San Francisco Chronicle in 1869, when he was only 23. However, he was kind of a violent man, getting into duels all the time. In 1879, DeYoung shot mayoral candidate Isaac Smith Collick twice just to try to get him out of the race. It goes without saying that DeYoung supported the other candidate. However, Collick ended up winning due to sympathy votes. 1 year later, Collick's son simply went up to the Chronicle's office and shot DeYoung dead. Oh yes, the supposed inspiration for Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, William Randolph Hearst. He gained control of Chronicle's rival, the Examiner, in 1887. Like Charles Foster Kane, William Randolph Hearst used his newspapers as his own personal mouthpiece. He eventually died in 1951. As you see before you, this is actually just his family's mausoleum, not his personal resting place. Oof. Norton I, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico, was America's first and only emperor, whose imperial capital was San Francisco. Some of his most famous decrees included a demand to build a bridge between San Francisco and Oakland, and to fine anyone who calls the city Frisco $25. The money issued by the imperial government of Norton I was accepted all around his imperial capital. Our greatest emperor died in 1880. Although born in Bavaria, Levi Strauss became an American citizen in 1853. While in San Francisco, he started Levi Strauss & Company, a dry goods importer. Of course, we all know him for inventing riveted denim jeans, but he actually shares this distinction with Jacob Davis, one of his best customers. Old West gambler, boxer, deputy town marshal for Tombstone, Arizona, and on the side of the law during the shootout at the OK Corral, Wyatt Earp was actually more of a jack of all trades, but master of none. Of course, the real question is, how the heck did he end up here in Colma of all places? He died in 1929 in Los Angeles. Well, as it turns out, his wife Josephine Sarah Marcus wanted to keep Wyatt close to her. So when she died, she was buried in a plot for her family, who were Jewish, in Colma, California. And so she made sure Wyatt was buried next to her. And well, that just about wraps it up for this first episode of the 360 Guide to California. I hope you enjoyed this first episode just as much as I enjoyed making it. And if you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on this video, and feel free to leave suggestions and ideas for the next episodes. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.